You must have written it well for it to have landed on his lapel.
Well,
he must have been
maybe he just took them out of the suit and pinned them on when someone came to the gate.
That's funny.
But as soon as I knew him, in spite of the fact that lots of things about the department and the city and everything, many things were weird, that was the only job interview I was interested in once I talked to him.
So what was quirky? You say there are many things that were weird.
Well, you know that Jerry had survived an anti-communist attack on him as director of the Dallas Museum of Art.
I didn't realize.
He was Dallas Museum of Fine Arts. It was then. He was the director of the Dallas Museum in the 50s. Mm-hmm. He had been the chair of the SMU art department from 1941 to 1967 when I was hired. So all the time he'd been the chair of the art department. In a large stretch of it, up until the late 50s maybe, he was the chair of the museum downtown also. And when he had a show of Picasso in the 50s, anti-communists threw vegetables at him on the front steps of the DMA.
Oh my goodness.
DMFA.
Right.
And there were many anti-communist posters posted around the museum.
So in
his office, the art offices.
Did they somehow associate Picasso?
Picasso was a known communist.
That's true.
That's all you needed to be, was a known communist.
Right.
And of course, a good graphic designer for communism, the Dove of Peace and all that stuff. I'm sure Picasso tired of Stalin really fast in the 30s, but that didn't stop the French love of the left.
Right.
Anyway, Jerry had collected many of the Dallas anti-communist posters, and they were all over the art office at SMU. So then I walked into an art office where there were big posters that said things like, "Don't play the red squares," and a chessboard, very clever posters of all kinds. And I thought,
right.
No, wait, Jerry Bywater isn't a virulent anti-communist. This must be ironic.
Right. Funny. So, so you land there in 1967, and I guess when I think of SMU and its art program today, your fingerprints are all over the program, right?
Oh, I'm so thrilled, especially the good part.
But the other name is of course Meadows, and Augur H. Meadows. In terms of the timeline, when he is the benefactor and the patron for the program, and kind of who is setting that vision that is so
Bill Jordan.
Okay, and so about who's influencing his decision to collect Spanish art, who's and everything that kind of goes along with.
Well, remember, he collected the wrong kind first.
Okay.
And that was, I believe, a result of his trip to Spain with his wife.
Okay.
They went to some museums, as you and I went to museums,
right.
And they fell in love with art. So they decided to have some for themselves and maybe to give it to a university. And they collected a lot of fakes.
Oh.
And some other bad stuff that wasn't fakes. Mm-hmm. Third, fourth rate, fifth rate nonsense.
Right.
And then when the big faker, Elmire de Horry, was apprehended, it was discovered that a lot of his, not the Spanish ones, a lot of the fake impressionist ones that he had painted were in the Meadows home collection. And then that the Spanish works in the ones he was giving to the university were actually not any good. So the thing that he did that is sort of noble and unusual is he didn't decide to just throw them all out and quit on art as being a suspect business. Mm-hmm. He decided to do it over again and do it right.
Right.
Which is probably the way he always operated.
Sure.
So he found the United States' greatest Spanish art expert, who was Jonathan Brown at NYU.
Okay.
And called Jonathan Brown and says, who's your best, just like Jerry did with
sure.
who's your best PhD you've ever trained? And Bill Jordan was graduating from NYU. Maybe he was already out a year or so. But Meadows invited him down. Bill told him the truth, mm-hmm. that the Spanish things were not fakes, but they were not worthy.
Right.
And he needed to hear this. And he said, well, how could we begin again? Mm-hmm. And Bill told him a little plan for how to begin again. So he hired Bill. He hired Bill while Jerry hired me. It was the same year.
Wow.
So Bill became my boss at the same time he arrived. They hired Bill to be head of the art department, head of the museum.
Wow. It's I've always found it so, it's curious. You just don't hear many collectors, falling in love with, one specific, genre or, nationality and in diving deep. It seems like people in his position oftentimes, kind of collect a survey and they collect things that they would have seen at the Met, right?
Right.
And so it's...
he just collected things he would have seen at the Prado.
Right. And the thing is, well, it was a while before the Prado took notice, but eventually, mm-hmm. They're like, wait a minute, what
mm-hmm.
have you guys collected here?
Right. As Bill and his relationships with a lot of really great dealers in New York, like the Wildensteins, mm-hmm. As Bill began to spend Alger's money in healthy ways, like the Philip IV portrait,
right? The
Velázquez portrait.
Oh, that's amazing.
And that was a ton of money when it was new.
Sure. Oh yeah.
And you can see the development of it in the Meadows Museum, because in the acquisition numbers on the labels, mm-hmm. the date of the acquisition is a part of the number. Mm-hmm. So you can watch 1968, 1969, 69, 69, 69, 1970, the numbers of Bill's building.
Sure. I believe that historians think that may have been Velázquez's first commission for Philip IV, which his role there in that court mm-hmm. was such an amazing story. Mm-hmm. And we don't have to go into, but as an art historian, I know you can appreciate that. But
and the Sybil with the tabula rasa, mm-hmm. and then the Goya Madhouse at Saragossa, mm-hmm. which is one of the most remarkable paintings in the world. Mm-hmm. So he began to focus things in different ways.
Absolutely. And so you come to Meadows. And I think you start teaching art history.
Everybody taught everything.
Okay, everybody taught everything, and so you're mm-hmm. teaching everything.
I was teaching drawing and art history,
right?
And then I was teaching so many survey sections of art history that I was just teaching art history,
right? But then you took there's a period where you left and worked on a project overseas.
Well, it was actually here, but it was to make a series with Vincent Scully of Yale.
Okay.
To make a series for perhaps PBS.
Right.
I mean, A&E and places like that were very new in mm-hmm. 1981.
Right.
So to make a series for public TV on each of Vincent Scully's books.
Okay.
Where he would explain the magic of because I had seen Vincent Scully lecture at Yale. Mm-hmm. And we went up, a couple of us, when there was a CAA in New York, so we skipped that and went up to Yale to watch a Vincent Scully art history lecture. And just like most of the class, we were in tears at the end.
Wow.
He was hypnotic.
Wow.
So the things that he could possibly say in the real locations, in the Pueblos or at the Greek temples, that would be magic. Mm-hmm. So there was a Dallas oil man who wanted to pay for it at the beginning. Oh, wow. Later on, he didn't.
Oh.
And we made a pilot for talking Vincent Scully into it, and then finding David Kennard, who was a TV producer who was great, and then getting Scully to write the scripts.
Sure.
It was pretty fun.
That sounds great. And so that played out over the course of what, like 5-6 years?
Yeah, 5 years. As it rose and produced and then didn't get funded.
Oh my gosh.
Annenberg flirted with it for 1 year. Right. That took a while. This is how all public television is.
Right.
Is many wonderful things are floated and not funded, and are lying there.
Right.
But one thing I did for Vincent Scully, I must mention, is my going to WNET in New York to have a talk with them about co-producing made them aware that Vincent Scully was magic, which they didn't know. They didn't know who he was.
Right.
And so they got a producer and a scriptwriter and got Vincent Scully to make a series in the Met about works of art, which was funded by WNET and was wonderfully successful. So Vincent got a lot out of that.
Right. But I imagine it was a lot easier to pitch a program where you bring the brain into your institution than it is to, fund sending the brain over to locales.
Since WNET was doing the pitch to itself,
right,
it was almost a done deal.
Right.
Which was a great thing for the talent.
Sure. So was that considered like a sabbatical or what?
No,
were you just?
I was out.
Okay.
You could say I was like Henry Kissinger, but I didn't have a long-term leave like Henry Kissinger.
Right.
But fortunately, they needed me when I was finished.
Wow.
Fortunately they had a job that was, and the dean said, "Do you want to do this?"
Right.
Instead of my having to wonder if I could come back.
Right. And so when you came back, if I remember, you came back as a department chair.
Yeah, I was the department chair of art.
Right. And so
that was the position they had.
Right.
And of course, my friend had just been it, so I figured he could tell me how to do it.
Sure. And so that is the position I remember you being in when I was at SMU.
Mm-hmm. It was fun.
My undergraduate years were from 88 to 92. Mm-hmm. And I wish I had had you as an instructor.
Because I was chair, I didn't teach but one class a semester.
Right.
So it wasn't.
Because I see things in your work that I wish I had learned a long time ago in terms of color and color theory. Right. I wish I lessons.
I don't mean you. I mean, I see things in my work that I wish I learned a long time ago. It takes so long to learn anything.
Right.
It's oddly, you've just made me realize that it doesn't take me any time to paint something. I'm fast. But it took me forever to learn how to do it.
Sure. I believe there's like a famous Picasso quote about that where, how long did it take you to paint, this painting? Like, 40 years.
40 years.
And so there's so much, if you're an artist, there's so much truth in that. Mm-hmm. There were lessons I had to learn about color that, again, I wish I had taken your color theory class.
It was a fun class.
And so, what were the key concepts? I mean, what were the things that you really drove home in that class?
Well, I suppose if you had something that is of our century and our time and essential,